Welcome to Modern Figures Podcast YouTube channel. Modern Figures Podcast is elevating the voices of Black women in computing and inspiring the next generation of the advanced technology workforce.
I'm Dr. Waisome.
I'm Dr. Kyla McMullen.
And each week we'll be your hosts as we highlight the stories of Black women in computing to inspire high schoolers and the young at heart and to dispel myths and preconceptions about Black women in computing.
So Jeremy and I are from the Institute for African American Mentoring in Computing Sciences, or IMCS. IMCS serves as a national resource for computing students, faculty, and industry professionals. We're funded by the National Science Foundation.
Our goals at IMCS are to increase the number of African Americans receiving doctoral degrees in the computing sciences, to promote and engage students in teaching and training opportunities, and to add more diverse researchers into the advanced technology workforce.
This podcast is funded by the National Center for Women and Information Technology. NCWIT is a nonprofit that convenes, equips, and unites change leader organizations to increase the participation of all women in the field of computing.
So our YouTube channel is going to feature every episode that we create, along with Q&A sessions and a whole lot more. And right after this brief introduction, we'll show you our first ever episode, or at least a clip from it, with NCWIT regular contributor Dr. JeffriAnne Wilder. And in this episode, we're going to tell you why this podcast was so important for us to create.
So you can find the Modern Figures podcast just about everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Twitcher, Blueberry, your mama's house, everywhere. So just visit our website, www.modernfigurespodcast.com, for more information.
And you can even watch the episodes on the website.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed this first episode that we created. Thank you so much for liking, watching, and subscribing. Bye!
We at NCWIT realize it's important to make sure that there are different voices at the table, and that's why this podcast exists, why we are a collaborative partner in this work, because it's really important to make sure that we know that little girls, even as young as preschool, all the way through college, can see themselves in who they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah, and that's really great because we have this relationship with your organization that's been long-standing. It's existed since both organizations have been around. So I'm the project manager for the Institute for African American Mentoring in Computing Sciences. We call ourselves IMCS, which is a lot easier to say, as you can imagine. And we serve as a national resource for African American and Black students and computing professionals in both academia and industry. Both of our organizations kind of got their start from the National Science Foundation, which provided funding for some alliance programs where there are multiple institutions that came together to basically support the populations that we represent. And so NCWIT works with women, we work with Black or African American people, and our goal is really to elevate these voices that are unheard otherwise within the computing community. So with that being said, some things arose at a recent conference that kind of led us to this place, and I'm really excited. Kyla, you want to talk about how that kind of came to be?
Well, we were chatting with the leadership at NCWIT, and we just had a very honest and frank conversation about how we can engage more Black women in the discussion and have them at the table when it comes to women in IT, women in computing, because a lot of times Black women, we have intersecting identities. We have two marginalized identities. The first is one being a woman, but then we also have the additional factor of being Black, and sometimes that isn't always addressed. So the purpose of this is to be a sounding board, to share our experiences and tell our stories, because as JeffriAnne said, that we are important, these stories are important, so people don't feel like they're the only ones who are going through these things.
And I think a lot of times, even sort of taking the lens and scoping out beyond the world of computing, if you think about what's happened over the past year with the Me Too movement, right? So, and even before that with the 2016 election and the near miss election of the first, female president, I think women's issues are really at the forefront and center. And part of the concern within that space is that women's issues, the recognition that all women's issues are not the same, right? We're all women, but we're very, very different. So, I mean, even thinking about how women of color have very distinctive issues. Our issues as Black women are very, very different, right, compared to the issues that white women have. And I think that's one of the great things about working for NCWIT is their recognition that not all women and girls are the same. We've been around for almost 15 years, and we currently have and working with over 1,100 organizations, and really thinking about how we can inspire girls differently. And that happens and looks different in different ways. And so it's just, again, really exciting that we're entering in this collaborative partnership together so we can inspire a different sector of girls and women in a different way.
Yeah, we're extremely excited at IMCS to have this relationship with your organization, hoping that it lasts much longer than my tenure in this current role. And speaking of my tenure in this current role, getting to my position was a challenge, and I know all of us have a story about how we kind of made it out of our graduate programs and how we've persisted through. And these are some of the things that we want to highlight on this podcast, is really not just, what we do in our current roles in computing, but really the story behind all of that, because it's really important and it informs most of what we do. And in particular for Black women or women in general, we don't leave those things at home, right? Like, the experiences that we have kind of inform how we interact day to day with our colleagues, our students, and in our general, personal lives.
That's right.
So I want to talk about a little bit about who we are. So, Kyla, you're faculty at the University of Florida.
That's right. This is my 5th year.
That's crazy.
I know, isn't that crazy? It just sounds crazy coming out of my mouth, 5th year. Because number one, I didn't even want to be a faculty member when I was in school. I told my advisor, I want to go back home. I'm from Washington, D.C. I was like, I want to go back home and work at some 3-letter organization and just, use my computer science skills to contribute to some matter of national security. But the opportunity opened up. I have an awesome mentor and boss now. So, yeah, but looking back on it, I wouldn't change anything about the process. But, for me, I mentioned that I grew up in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Northeast. I went to a science and tech high school. And, even in high school, I had no idea I was going to be a computer scientist. I thought that I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. But growing up...
Did you were you the only Black person who was in your high school in that program?
See, I actually wasn't, because my high school was pretty diverse, but we had a computer science program.
Oh.
And the computer science, it was a science and tech high school, so we had different tracks, a biology track, engineering track, computer science track, but all the people I saw on the computer science track were white boys. And I was like, dang, I need to figure out how to be a white boy.
What?
So I can, that thought literally crossed my mind. I had put together a whole outfit in my head. I thought I'm going to have a Dragon Ball Z t-shirt.
Wait a minute.
I'm going to have some jeans. I'm going to slick my hair back, because I was like, how am I going to fit in with these people who I don't look like, who, I knew them, I was friends with a lot of them, but when it came to, they already knew how to program their calculators. We'd be in, math class, and they program
Snake.
Pac-Man.
Oh, Pac-Man, okay.
In BASIC, and I'm like, just what is this? Show me what this is. Teach me your ways.
That's crazy. I went to engineering, science, and technology magnet high school as well, and drove 45 minutes across Orlando every day to go to that high school, because I knew when I was in 7th grade that I wanted to be an engineer, which is crazy, right? Who says that? I'm going to be an engineer. You're 11, stop.
At that point, I thought engineers, conducted trains.
I think that's what most people feel.
Yeah.
But I remember being one of 6 Black females in that program, and what that felt like. And we all had different interests. We didn't have tracks like you in your high school, but I remember, because you would be the only, right, in your classes, and what that felt like and how isolating it was. And, you know, it was cool to be a part of something that like actually exposed me to engineering so young, but I didn't realize that that was going to be my entire existence moving forward, right? And I feel like that's not something that we talk about, is that like level of isolation moving forward. I was comfortable with it because I grew up in a predominantly white community, so, you know, I most of my friends were white, but at this high school, it was like half underrepresented students, half white students, and the white students were generally more affluent. And so I spent most of my day with the affluent, predominantly white students, and then I would go to lunch, you know, and have to be in a space surrounded by students who were from like a more disadvantaged background. And that feeling was just awkward. Like, how do I fit in? Like, I don't fit in either group, right? Like, I'm not a Caucasian female, and I'm also just, I wasn't hood enough. I'm still not hood enough.
Oh, but you are.
I'm just brown, right? So I could go in the space and be in the space, but as soon as I open my mouth, people are like, what?
Like, wait a minute.
I mean, and also my name is Jeremy, so there's a lot there. But talk about intersecting identities, right? And what that feels like as a child, having that kind of relationship. So I know, JeffriAnne, a lot of your research kind of ties into the sociology of those things, and just wanted to bring you into this conversation. So
it does, because I mean, I'm listening to your stories from high school, and it's all resonating with me. So I'm from Cleveland, so if I could shout out the 216-440 area.
Okay.
I was there before LeBron was. I went to an all-girls prep school. And although my doctorate is not in STEM or computing, even as a high school student, being in an all-girls environment really sort of, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that whatever it is I wanted to do, there were no limitations on it because I was a girl. You know, that was pretty much ingrained. And of course, having the mother that I have, that was sort of how I was socialized anyway. By the time I got to high school and in this environment, being at Hathaway Brown School for Girls, which is the oldest college prep school in the state of Ohio, I knew that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So by the time I got through college and decided to do my doctoral work here at the University of Florida, even though my area of study is sociology and women's studies, I was still an only. I was still one of the only ones, even in programs like that, and studying the things that I do, which is black women. I was somewhat disappointed and a little bit jaded at the fact that there weren't more people looking like me at the lectern as mentors. I, made sure I could do everything in my power to ensure that my dissertation committee was full of women and women of color, and it was. So my experience, even though it's not one within the STEM world or computing, is still very, very similar. And I think that as a black woman in these academic spaces, so let's talk about the percentage of people in general who have doctoral degrees. It's really, really small, something like less than 1%. Yeah. And when you talk about black women, I mean, literally we're all unicorns around this table, right? Very few of us have made it to that level. And so when you get to that level, you're going to be an only, regardless of your disciplinary focus, because there aren't a whole lot of us like that. And, Kyla, you talked about trying to figure out how you're going to be like the white boys. I was like,
Turn into, turn to be a metamorphosis, because that's the only way they wouldn't recognize me.
You were watching too much anime.
Yeah. But, I mean, honestly, we could be, real for a second. I mean, that's kind of like that inner voice that you get. Even if you have such a strong sense of self, you think about, what do I have to do to be like them in order to survive and to succeed and to do well?
Which is unfortunate, because you
lose
yourself.
You lose yourself. Because like for me, I love Saved by the Bell. Like I loved that show growing up. And like, but all the nerds on that show, what did they look like?
Yes.
Like they looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I didn't see myself in that role. Like I literally went to high school looking for the max. Like, all right, where are we gonna hang out after class and solve all our problems? Like, that sort of depiction on TV, it was so unreal. It was definitely not what high school was.
No, not at all, because they were all like, 30-somethings playing high schoolers, so like they're
Right.
actually physically nothing like high schoolers.
Right.
But anyways, I was thinking about your comment, JeffriAnne, about being unicorns, and I have to like call out the elephant in the room, which is Kyla being the first female person of color to graduate from the University of Michigan with her PhD in computer science.
Insane.
Right. Isn't that crazy?
Insane.
Yeah.
That we're still making history.
Still making
Right.
history. Just 2012, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been anyone after me.
Yeah, we had that conversation with one of the recruiters from Michigan recently at the Richard Tapia Celebration for Diversity in Computing conference, and he was like, I think there might be one person in the program right now, maybe.
Right, so if you're listening, call me.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, truly insane. And so
It really is.
what I appreciate, so we're at the University of Florida. We're recording this in our College of Journalism and Communications studio, and what's crazy about being at the University of Florida and in the computer science department here is I live in the land of Black Girl Magic in the lab that I'm in. And it's truly remarkable. I think we have 22% of the nation's Black female PhDs in our program alone.
Right.
And 22% sounds amazing and wonderful and great, but then that actual representation ends up being like a handful of people, like not double digit. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's incredible that across the country we don't have more than 50?
Yeah. Like it's
enrolled.
It's a really low number. It's really, really low.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to again, so hammering home the importance of this podcast, the importance of NCWIT. That's exactly why we're here having this conversation.
Right.
Because it didn't have to be that way.
Right, and there's nothing special about us.
No.
For me, like I didn't have some, we're talking to a group of high school students and they had this sort of feeling like, oh, if you go into computer science, that means you were raised differently, or, you have this different thing about your upbringing. I had the most humble upbringing, and I can go into that later, but, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. Like I wasn't always at the top of the class. Like I feel like I had so much like strife with everything. I figured out, okay, I can deal with adversity because everything was a challenge. Everything was a challenge, but it's just about sticking to it. So as I said, there's nothing special about us. Like if no one is there to show you the path, show you the way, encourage you that, hey, I don't have to be the only one. There is no secret sauce.
Yeah. And I think so. My degree is in civil engineering, and it's equally as dire in civil engineering in terms of the representation of Black women with PhDs or just with degrees in civil engineering, period. And I was fortunate enough, after the craziness that was my doctoral degree, to develop a relationship with your boss, and he just felt like I would be a good fit in terms of like my ability to manage projects. As a project manager, it makes a lot of sense to have someone who's actually good at that at the helm of the ship. So I ended up kind of in the tech and computing space, and it feels really familiar because I went through a similar experience. And so being able to advise students about, surviving, making it through, finding the resources that you need, whether that be through IMCIT, NCWIT, or any other resource that's around the country, we're here, we have that expertise because we've gone through the fire.
Right.
And we survived. And you're thriving, right? You're 5 PhD.
Thriving and surviving.
Yeah.
With my edges.
What? I think all of us in this room have edges.
Listen, mine are on life support, okay?
I can't with you.
I mean, they just are. I'm just going to be honest, right? But, I think, and I don't know if we're at the part where we're going to start talking about more in-depth experiences about, like, our journey in academia.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about edges and life support. So I graduated from University of Florida with my doctorate in sociology and PhD concentration in women's studies in August of 2008, so 10 years ago. and immediately ventured into my first tenure track role at the University of North Florida, and stayed there for 10 years, and pretty much textbook sort of examples of, like, you know, poster child for diversity, right?
Oh, we all were.
Right?
Oh yeah,
Like every
literally on a
committee.
poster.
I was on the bus, and in the Jax Airport.
You fancy.
Okay.
Yeah, listen, you go to the Jax Airport, there was like this, you know, 8-foot life-size, you know,
Oh, wow.
picture of me. Like,
wow.
you can have it all, right?
I was on the
Um,
website. I wasn't cool.
Just, you know, all kinds of stuff. Was on every committee, got every award I could, you know, dotted all the I's, crossed the T's, super polite, you know, very respectable, you know, not angry, you know, never angry.
No, you can't be that angry black
You
woman.
know,
No,
just kind of
Can't be her.
like perfectly together, polished edges, you know, outfit on point all the time, you know, never in a bad mood. Sure, I'll help
Right.
you. And found myself, you know, 5 or 6 years into the job, like literally dying, you know, from exhaustion. And I ended up getting married, having a baby, and getting divorced within like a 15-month period.
Wow.
And it was like hell. And then also had to go through like the process of getting tenure.
Wow.
And I survived and all that, and
my
it was
goodness.
dazzling, and I looked great, you know. But I just found myself increasingly, like, the more I felt like I jumped through a hoop, the higher the hoop got, right?
Yeah.
And no one bothered to say, "Are you okay?" It's just like the response was, "Oh, it's amazing that you're doing all this so well." And I got to a point where I just got so exhausted.
Yeah.
So, you know, 8 months ago, technically 5 months ago, I left my university, walked away from tenure, which is something that you just don't do.
It's unheard of.
It is unheard of, especially, and I was at the point where I was going up for full professor at, you know,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, my research game was on point, just doing double and triple what you're supposed to do.
You say keep it.
Yeah, I said, you know, guys, I'm good. I'm good. You know, I told my university how bad they smell by writing an open letter about my experience as being the only person, and that was great. But I just decided that I turned 40 2 years ago, and decided to just like reevaluate everything in my life, right? What made
Wait
me
a second.
happy.
Hold on. Roll it back.
Roll it back.
You are what?
I will be 42 in a week.
Hey.
What?
Yes, baby. Yes. Yes. Just
What?
popping. Yeah.
Talk about unicorn.
Right.
Hey. Yes. Thank you. Thank
Life
you.
don't crack, for
Show
real.
down.
It don't.
Show down.
And when I said I was double the legal age,
I did not
literally
believe
meant
you.
it.
I really
She was not playing
didn't.
with you.
I'm never playing.
Oh my goodness.
Just put me in the category with Sanaa and Gabrielle and Nia,
Okay.
their
Okay.
younger sister.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I decided to just do something really crazy and just leave. And it's funny because the work that I do at NCWIT is all research. I'm not teaching, but I feel like I'm doing a lot of the same kind of stuff on the social science team, and I get a chance to get involved in really great opportunities like this. And so for me, I don't miss it. I am actually writing a book about my experience, sort of trying to have it all. And the title, I think the tentative title is something like, you know, balancing on a tightrope with your edges laid.
I
Like
love
my journey through and exit from academia,
I
right?
love
So I'm going
that.
to tell this story about that experience
Yes.
and how crazy that was.
Yeah.
And you know, this notion of we were talking earlier during lunch about Black women's mental health and how important that is, particularly if you're in academia,
Yes.
right? So thinking about taking good care of ourselves, because you know, this notion of Black girl magic, it really is, it's real, right? It's not a fallacy, it is real. But there's this expectation that we're going to just do exceedingly and abundantly above and beyond what people expect us to do, that it comes to our detriment at some point.
Yeah.
Because people think, oh, you're so strong, you can handle this, and
Yeah.
then you just get more and more piled onto you.
It's too much.
And no one says, hey, can I take this off of your plate? They just say,
Oh, no, here's
you
some more.
handle this so well.
Yeah.
Here's some more.
Yes.
Like I liken academia to a pie eating contest where you win and the prize is more pie.
Yes. That's so true. That's an excellent metaphor.
What?
Just think about it. If you
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
it's a fighting contest because the better you do, the more you get.
Yes.
The more
Man.
responsibilities,
Yeah.
the more everything
Yeah.
that you get. And you're
Is it a different flavor, at least?
it's the same blueberry pie that you are
Yeah.
tired of with no seasoning.
Well, throwing it back to the white boys, though, so that's the thing that's different, right? So we're expected to do above and beyond what we've been called to do,
Right.
Over servicing,
Yep.
over mentoring,
Yep.
over
right.
mothering, because you're nurturing, you're mothering, you're caring, you're
And
mentoring.
none of that is valued.
None of it.
And none of it gets rewarded,
Yeah,
right?
none of it is valued in the academy.
Yeah, that's right. And also, like, being so visible, like, students know, hey, I've never had a black professor. I've never had a woman professor.
Yes.
They will gravitate towards
Yes.
you. So you'll get all this additional service.
Yes.
And, you know, you do it because it's at your heartstrings. I'm like, oh, my gosh, here are some, you know, young people that I can actually have an impact on.
Mhm.
At the same time, my colleague down the hall does not have those same service requirements.
Right.
While a student is bawling their eyes out for 30 minutes, you know, when I'm comforting them, I don't mind it. But, you know, the fact that it's taking away from the same time I could be using for doing research like my colleague is. So,
Mhm.
you know, you have this invisible burden that people don't always see, and it's not always counted.
Well, it's not that they don't see it, because they see it. They just choose not to recognize it.
This is true.
So there's a difference between seeing something and, like, acknowledging something.
Yeah.
Right? And I really feel like that's really what's missing is it's not something that's going to help you get tenure. It's not something that's going to help you promote. There's no way to really measure it.
Right.
So how do they value it? And that's the argument that they'll use. But you know I'm doing it.
Right.
Right.
You know I'm doing this. You send people to me.
Right.
Because they come to your office and say, hey, you know, I need help, I need mentorship.
And not just students, right? They'll send people who are recently hired to you.
Yep.
They'll send people who are interested in working on projects, but it doesn't really fit their agenda, but they feel like you can handle it for some reason,
Right.
even though it's outside of your entire research story. So there's so much.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
So I think that kind of lays the foundation for who we are, why we're here. We kind of talked about why this is really important. I think one of the major things that, you know, we should really highlight is just the lack of information out there too, right? So
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of research on black women in computing and in STEM. It's a newly budding space that I think is starting to catch some traction in the research area, in particular within engineering education and CS education. But, I mean, if you think about it, the only representatives that most young people have for what a black computer scientist looks like is in a movie. Like, we've got Black Panther,
Yeah.
we had Hidden Figures, and while those things are great, you know, Shuri's a boss,
Yeah,
right?
Shuri is.
But Shuri's a fictional character,
Right.
right? And so this podcast can actually give people the voices of real human beings who are doing some incredible work.
Yeah.
And I know Kyla will talk about eventually what you do in 3D audio, which I still don't fully understand. And we're going to have some people talking about intersectionality and, you know, being black, being a woman. We're going to have people who are talking more technically about, like, software and augmented and virtual reality, robotics,
All sorts of things.
all sorts of things.
All sorts of things you can do in computing with your degree.
But we'll also talk about, like, who these people are and how they got to where they are today.
Right.
So I'm really excited.
I'm excited.
I think it's
about
going to bring some visibilities to some hidden but now modern figures, right? These people
Right.
are here, they're doing the work, they're being recognized across the country for their contributions, and we just want to help make them more visible through our podcast.
it.
And, you know, I think this is a really perfect time for me to insert another NCWIT commercial
Okay,
here.
go ahead.
You talked about people doing some wonderful things in computing in the tech world all across the nation. NCWIT has a program called Aspirations that is really about highlighting and acknowledging high school girls, collegiate women, educators, and recognizing them for all the fabulous things that they're doing in the world of computing. And even though by the time we think this may air, the Aspiration Awards cycle will have ended, but don't worry, don't fear. We do this every year, so it's important for us to let you know that we as an organization, we recognize the efforts of girls and women and everything that they do, and that's really, really important. And I don't know if we should also talk about the fact that this is exciting because it's a pilot, and we want people to get so excited about this that this becomes a permanent thing, right?
Yeah, we really do. And I think also talking about research and the lack of information, right? Like, we want to leverage this as an opportunity to get data, right? On how having something that makes these people more visible impacts the lives of students across the country.
Right, because if you don't know something exists, then how in the world can you aspire to be that or to do that?
So true.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Speaking of just like research on, just people in computing, Black women, like Jeremy, did you like know growing up, like what made you want to be an engineer?
So in 7th grade, first of all, I mentioned earlier that I came from like a predominantly white community. My family was not affluent, like we weren't rich.
Y'all wasn't Carlton Banks?
No, we weren't that level of affluent Black. Yeah, not all the way up there. But I did go to like a really good high school. My mom is an attorney, and my dad worked for AT&T for 30 years before he retired. So I had an example of someone who was kind of in the tech space in my life from the beginning. But when I was in middle school, my parents started sending me to all these camps every summer, and I was like, y'all, you don't love me anymore? Like, what is it? I don't know. But really, it was my mom. She just wanted us to be exposed to everything. And so I went to veterinary camp, and I went to camp for violin, and Christian camp, and art camp. So one of the camps that I ended up attending was at Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, and it was a STEM or science, technology, engineering, mathematics focused camp, right? And we did biology and chemistry and physics and math in a summer camp.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So we stayed overnight at that institution, and it's an all women's college. So ironic that it's kind of come full circle, but we actually had the opportunity to tour Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Oh, wow.
Which is a phenomenal institution. The national labs in our country are amazing. If you ever have a chance to go visit, I would definitely encourage you to go. But they allow student groups to take tours of their facilities. And so one of the tours that I got to go on was to see a nuclear reactor facility. And I had no concept, right, of what I was experiencing. I just knew it was really cool. And I'm standing in like this facility, I'm seeing like all of these chemicals like moving around, like there's like mercury in the wall and it's measuring things. I have no idea what's happening. But the lady who was talking to us about the facility and what she did, she had a PhD in chemical engineering.
Oh, wow.
And she was a Black woman.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, I want to be her when I grow up. And literally, that was it.
Wow.
Right? Like, I'd been doing all this math and sciencey stuff the entire time I was at that program. But the thing that really truly inspired me to become an engineer was seeing that Black woman doing her job.
Yep.
That's all. Like, we didn't have some deep conversation. Yeah. I probably didn't even introduce myself because, you know, even though I'm a full extrovert today in my current form, I don't know what never mind. I was a really gregarious kid. I was kind of in your face. But I never thought that meeting someone would change the trajectory of my life the way that did.
Wow. Wow. And it goes back to what we were saying. Like, if you don't have exposure to different options, you have no idea that's a possibility for your life.
And granted, I hate chemistry. So I didn't end up becoming a chemical engineer. But what it did was open the door to all the different types of engineering disciplines that were available to me, whether it's civil engineering, computer science and engineering, computer engineering, which is different, and hopefully we'll talk about that in more detail, industrial engineering. There's so much in engineering that you can do, and I wouldn't have known it had I not said when I got back home, like, Mommy, I know what I want to be when I grow up. And when I said, I want to get my PhD in engineering, she said, okay. Instead of, girl, you crazy.
Right. Right, because a lot of people have told me, like, if their parents will be like, oh, engineering is hard.
Right.
Math is hard.
Right.
And they have no idea. Like, maybe math is hard for you, but you don't need to discourage kids from things that they have interest in.
Right. Instead, my mom was like, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And I'm going to help you do it.
That's
and,
awesome.
I mean, here I am. So it worked. But
Yeah, my
I
story
wish.
was like yours,
Yeah.
too. Like, so when I was in high school again, trying to figure out how to turn into a NY boy, I had this teacher, because like the whole time there were always, these white male teachers who were teaching this white male computer science. And then the year that I started, we had a brand new teacher, Mr. Ware, shout out, Mr. Randy Ware.
Okay.
And he was a young black guy. I think he had just got his master's in math, but his minor, I think, was in computer science. So he taught the computer math class, which was the class before AP computer science. And I was like, Mr. Ware is cool. He would come in, like, we would have a little warm up. He would talk to us about whatever, like, might be a basketball game, whatever, like, was on an award show. Like, he was cool.
Real life.
Yeah, real life. And then be like, all right, did you do your assignment though? So he wasn't easy on us, but he was just a representation that I didn't have to change myself to be a computer scientist. Like, until then, I didn't know any black person who was in computer science. And just, having that constant daily reassurance from him that, this is what you can do. This is an option. Also, I was the worst computer scientist. Like, we had this little, I think we used like Microsoft Visual Studio or something. And like, I was like, can I please take home the little disk to install this at home? Because I need to practice. Like, these 40 minutes in class are cool, but I'm struggling. So, he let me out. Never mind. But I practiced at home, because I wasn't even good at it. But it was just something that I was like, I can figure this out. Mr. Ware is doing it. So
what's funny about you saying that is, I think people a lot of times think, oh, I'm gonna work or do the things that I'm good at. Right? And that's just not true.
It does not work like that.
It doesn't work like that, but then also, like, what are you passionate about?
Right.
Because if you're passionate about something, it doesn't matter how good you are initially.
Right.
You'll work at it.
And you will figure it out.
And you'll become the best.
That's right.
At it, if it's something you're truly passionate about. And so I tell people all the time, yeah, engineering is hard, but so is life in general, right? Life is hard. And we can't keep telling children math and science are hard.
Right.
When in reality, existing as an adulting is hard, people.
Right. And then it's further compounded by hearing something's hard, and then the first time you're exposed to it, if you have some sort of trial or tribulation, it's compounded by the effect that, oh yeah, people who look like me don't do this anymore.
Right.
This is just my affirmation. I don't belong here.
Right.
Which could not be further.
It's not, because a lot of them don't know what they're doing for real.
They don't. Like, even people that are doing it don't know what they're doing sometimes. And I remember, like, for me, like, my first grade in college on a computer science test was a grade close to my age. So.
What?
Wow. Listen.
And you were a teenager?
Yeah, I was a teenager.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I went to college early, so how about that? That was an even lower number, so.
Okay.
Well, I think you both are talking about the importance of having a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's something that we talk about a lot in our NCWIT resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea of, not being in that fixed state of mind that, oh gosh, I can't really do this, or this is too hard, or
Right.
I haven't seen anyone else who looks like me doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I think just constantly being in that sort of mindset that you can do it, right? Empowering yourself, that even a little self-talk, and then having people around you encouraging that growth mindset is really, really important. I think that's probably, that and encouragement are probably two of the most important factors in advancing and sort of broadening this participation of women and girls of color in computing.
Yeah.
Is knowing that. And then the other thing that you talked about was so important. We're just all regular people.
Right.
What were we talking about? We were talking about, we were rapping earlier. I mean, we don't want to do that unless we have to.
They ain't ready.
Okay, next time. Okay, all right. Okay, next time.
What just happened?
But just the fact that, You have a PhD in computing. Jeremy's PhD is in engineering, civil engineering. Mine's in sociology, and we still know when to cut it and to be ratchet and to cut.
Stop! No, we're not doing this.
Hey.
I already told y'all I'm not hood enough, so I won't be doing
but
that.
You know the words, Jeremy.
That's fine.
I mean, that's the whole point. It's
We're
like
regular people.
right, and not feeling like you have to turn into a white boy.
Right.
You can be all black girl, whatever, with your hair changing, your whole self, all your earrings,
Yeah,
all
my
your
hair's gonna be
weave.
different the next time we do this.
Clearly, my crochets are coming in next week. They coming. So, I mean, but being okay with all of that and recognizing that none of that has to change.
Yeah.
Or even if that's not even you as a black girl, right? That's okay too, right? That you don't have to sing Young Dolph and all that stuff and
Young Dolph, really?
Cut it. OT Genesis. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm 42, but inside I'm 22.
Okay.
I'm just saying, right? I mean, I think that's a really important.
I told you earlier,
message.
her wedding was awesome, right?
Oh, yeah.
Best time ever.
So we had fun. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I think we're wrapping up, and I just wanted to kind of point us back to how you guys subscribe and find us, right?
Yeah. So you can visit our website, modernfigurespodcast.com, and we'll also have a space for you to enter our contest. So you can get some swag, you can subscribe to the podcast. We want you to listen to an episode, listen to this episode, tell us what you think about it. Be honest, tell us exactly what you think, and then let us know. You can send us an email to production@modernfigurespodcast.com and let us know how you felt about today's show. If there's anything you'd like to hear, just tell us all of that. And also email us any questions that you might have, anything that's burning, desires, topics, things like that.
Yeah, and you can follow us on social media. Or at least you can follow me. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm at
Y'all
Jeremy.
can follow me too.
I'm at Jeremy Waisome on Twitter. That's how you find me. Or a girl named Jeremy on Instagram.
I believe on Twitter I am at Dr_Kyla. That's Dr. Kyla.
Dr. Kyla.
Yeah, the underscore is there because there's another Dr. Kyla. She's a vet. She went to vet camp, I guess, and then that really touched her heart. But anyways, I'm the other Dr. Kyla on there with the underscore in the middle.
So I haven't been on Twitter since like 2014. However, NCWIT is at NCWIT on Twitter. And I believe I'm at JeffriAnne W. But look for NCWIT first, and then I'll next episode have my stuff together.
You can also follow IMCS at IAAMCS.
That's it.
On Twitter. Whoop, whoop. Okay, great. So that's the end of today's episode.
Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Really?